I'll never forget that day on the road. It seemed like a routine trip, just another truck delivery to another state. But when I saw that man standing alone on the shoulder, something made me stop. I'm not exactly sure what compelled me to pull him into the truck at that moment. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, almost pleading for help. Or maybe it was just my instinct to help a stranger in trouble. Either way, as soon as he got in the truck, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something in his expression, a restlessness that made me uneasy. Despite his thanks, it felt like he was watching me cautiously, as if he was sizing up every move I made. Gradually, that feeling of being a good Samaritan was replaced by a growing suspicion. As we drove down the deserted road, my eyes kept darting to the rear-view mirror, trying to catch any odd behavior from my passenger. And that's when I realized, something was off. What should have been just another routine trip had turned into something sinister and threatening. His backpack looked worn and crumpled, as if it had been on many journeys. As I started the engine and we drove down the road, I stole glances at him, hoping he'd start a conversation. But he stayed silent, staring out the window with a distant look. I tried to make small talk a few times, asking where he was going and what he did, but he just shook his head, giving short answers. His silence was making me more and more uneasy. Normally, I enjoy chatting with hitchhikers to pass the time, but this guy seemed determined not to make any connection. As the miles ticked by, my discomfort only grew. There was something about this quiet passenger that kept me on edge, like he was hiding something. His closed-off expression and restrained movements made me wonder what was going on in his head. Was he planning something? Was there something dangerous in that backpack? Gradually, the sympathy I felt at first was replaced by growing distrust. As the trip continued, I started noticing some strange behaviors from my passenger. Several times, I saw him nervously glancing at the rear-view mirror, as if he was expecting someone to follow us. That started making me even more uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was just my paranoia. But as time went on, his actions became more and more unsettling. He kept shifting in his seat, moving from one leg to the other, and his eyes scanned the surroundings with an urgency that intrigued me. Then, I noticed a car following us closely. It seemed to keep a constant distance, even when I slowed down. A chill ran down my spine, and my hands tightened on the steering wheel. This couldn't be a coincidence. Was this man being followed? As the miles rolled on, my heart raced faster. My eyes switched between the road and the rearview mirror, trying to figure out what was going on. Why was this man so nervous? And who was the car that kept tailing us? Something was definitely wrong, and I was starting to regret picking up this stranger. I could feel the adrenaline surging through me as that car started pushing us harder on the road. The man next to me looked increasingly terrified, frantically urging me not to stop the truck, no matter what happened. "Whatever happens, don't stop," he kept repeating nervously, his eyes darting between the road and the mirror. At that moment, everything inside me was screaming to pull over, find a safe place, and figure out what was happening. But the way that stranger was pleading with me, with such desperate urgency, made me hesitate. Something serious must be going on to make him so scared. Then, suddenly, the car behind started shoving us, trying to force the truck off the road. My heart raced as I felt the vehicle shaking from the impact. I gripped the wheel tightly, trying to keep control as the adrenaline surged through my body. What the hell was happening? Who were these people chasing us, and why? Panic began to take over, leaving me more confused and frightened. At that moment, all I wanted was to find a safe place and escape from this situation, but the man beside me insisted I keep going, no matter what. In that instant, everything inside me was shouting to stop and get out of that crazy situation. But the man's desperate urgency made me hesitate. Something had to be very wrong to scare him so much. So, on impulse, I decided to speed up the truck. I floored the gas pedal, feeling the vehicle pick up speed as the car behind tried to catch up. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking on the wheel, but I was determined to escape this terrifying chase. For a few minutes, I managed to keep some distance from the other vehicle. But then, on a sharp turn, I spotted a detour on the road. Without thinking twice, I decided to take the risk and veer off. I heard the screech of tires behind me as I managed to escape that sinister car. A few miles ahead, I found a remote spot and stopped the truck. To my surprise, the man just got out of the truck without a word. He briefly turned around and muttered a thanks before disappearing into the darkness. There I was, alone in the truck, with my heart still racing and my mind in turmoil. What the hell had just happened? Who were those people, and why were they chasing us? And who was that terrified stranger? Slowly, the adrenaline faded, leaving a sense of relief for having escaped the situation. But at the same time, a huge curiosity about what really happened remained. What should have been just another routine trip had turned into something eerie and terrifying. And I knew I'd never forget that encounter with the mysterious passenger.
I knew I shouldn't have stopped there, but I was exhausted after hours of driving alone on that deserted road. The truck stop looked so gloomy and abandoned, but there was no other place nearby to spend the night. As soon as I got out of the truck and looked around, a feeling of unease started creeping over me. Something didn't seem right. The eerie silence, broken only by the creaking of the wind, made my hairs stand on end. I stared at the shadows cast by the few streetlights and wondered if someone was watching me. I quickly walked to the bathroom, afraid to be alone in such a remote place for too long. When I came out, I anxiously looked around for any signs of life, but saw no one. I decided to get back to the truck as quickly as possible, but when I approached, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. My heart raced. Had someone entered? I remembered the stories other truckers told about this stop: bodies found, unexplained disappearances. A shiver ran down my spine. Slowly, I approached, praying not to find anything wrong. While I was in the truck, trying to fall asleep, I heard a noise outside. My heart raced, and I became alert, listening closely. Footsteps. There was definitely someone walking around the vehicle. My stomach churned with fear. Carefully, I moved towards the window and peered out into the darkness. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving, barely perceptible, in the dark between the streetlights. I recoiled, panic rising in my chest. Who or what was prowling around my truck at this time of night in such a remote and eerie place? I tried turning on the radio to distract myself, but it only emitted static and distorted whispers, even though it was off. A wave of chills swept over me. That wasn't natural. My fingers trembled as I fumbled with the buttons, to no avail. The oppressive silence returned, interrupted only by the eerily familiar noises outside. Slowly, I backed away from the window, praying that whoever was out there wouldn't discover that I was inside. My whole body was begging me to leave, but I was too terrified to move. I could only huddle in the seat, praying for dawn to come soon. Unable to stay put any longer, I decided to investigate what was happening. With great fear, I got out of the truck and began to inspect the area around it. That's when I spotted marks on the ground, strange tracks, as if something had been dragged away from the vehicle. My heart raced as I crouched down to examine them more closely. It didn't look natural. I walked a few more steps and found something even more disturbing: an old journal, partially buried in the dirt. Trembling, I picked it up and flipped through the yellowed pages. The entries talked about vengeful spirits haunting that truck stop, luring solitary drivers to then torment and even abduct them. A wave of fear engulfed me. Was I being watched by something supernatural at that very moment? I looked around, feeling an intense chill. I had the sense that there were eyes on me, even though I couldn't see anything beyond the shadows. I clutched the journal to my chest and ran back to the truck, locking the doors quickly. My whole body was shaking. What was happening there? Who or what was watching me? I couldn't stay in the truck any longer, waiting for whatever was watching me. I needed to find out the truth. With great fear, I left the vehicle and continued to explore the area, following the strange tracks I had found earlier. I walked cautiously, looking around constantly, until I spotted something among the shadows, a hidden cabin, almost invisible. My heart raced. Slowly, I approached and checked the entrance. It was unlocked. Without thinking too much, I went inside. Inside, I found a scene that froze my blood: surveillance equipment, hidden cameras, and detailed plans for robberies and assaults. Everything pointed to the existence of a gang operating at that deserted truck stop. I realized then that it wasn't any vengeful spirit. I had been targeted by criminals all along. They had been monitoring me since my arrival, waiting for the right moment to act. The journal I found earlier was probably just a trap to scare off solitary drivers. I trembled with fear, realizing that I could have been kidnapped and robbed at any moment. I needed to get out of there immediately. I ran back to the truck and sped away from that place as fast as I could. My body was still shaking with fear and adrenaline. That truck stop was a real den of criminals, disguised as a horror legend. They had completely deceived me. I would never stop at that sinister place again. Once I reached an area with cell service, I immediately called the police and reported everything I had discovered in that scary cabin. They were shocked by my account and quickly set up an operation to investigate the truck stop. A few days later, I learned that the agents had managed to arrest the gang that was using the location to monitor and rob lonely truck drivers passing through. Those criminals had exploited the place's bad reputation, spreading ghost stories to deter any investigation and keep their operation secret. I still get chills when I think about that terrifying night at the deserted truck stop. The mere sound of an engine or the sight of a streetlight makes me relive the fear I felt. I can't believe I had been targeted by criminals the whole time, when I thought I was dealing with supernatural forces.
I love driving alone at night. It's when I feel the most free and connected to the road. I take shortcuts through back roads whenever I can to save time, even if they're a bit more isolated. Tonight, I decide to take a less busy route, a rural road I know well that gets me to my destination faster. As I cruise down the road, I only hear the hum of the engine and the whistle of the wind. It's so peaceful and zen. But as I drive on, I start to notice something odd. There are no other cars on the road, and strangely, I can't see any signs of life around. Even the nocturnal animals seem to have vanished. An eerie silence hangs in the air. I feel a shiver run down my spine. Maybe I should have taken the main highway, even if it took a bit longer. Something doesn't seem right about this deserted road. But I decide to keep going. I know this path well and don't want to waste time. It's probably just my imagination, right? Before I can even process the strange silence, I spot a woman standing on the shoulder, waving frantically. I slow down and stop the truck. As I get closer, she runs towards me with a desperate look on her face. "Please, can you help me? My car broke down and I need to get to the nearest town," she says, panting. I hesitate for a moment, wondering why there aren't any other vehicles around. But I can't just leave her there, alone in the middle of nowhere. I turn on the hazard lights and get out of the truck to talk to her. "Sure, I can give you a ride to the nearest town. It's really dark and deserted around here. Are you okay? What happened to your car?" I ask, trying to stay calm despite the unsettling feeling. The woman seems relieved but still a bit agitated. "Thank you so much, I really didn't know what to do. My car just stopped working out of nowhere, and there's no one around. You're the first person I've seen in hours." I agree to take her with me, but a growing unease starts forming in my chest. the silence of the road and the absence of other vehicles are making me increasingly worried. Something is definitely not right here. Despite my rising unease, I can't just leave this woman in the middle of nowhere. She seems genuinely scared and lost, so I decide to take her to the next town. As soon as she gets into the truck, I notice she can't stop making calls, speaking in a strange and coded language. Yes, I'm on my way. I need to get there as fast as possible, she murmurs into the phone, her voice urgent. I glance at her sideways, trying to figure out what's going on. Is she involved in something illegal? As we continue driving, she keeps making calls, giving coordinates and information I can't understand. My stomach knots and my heart races. Something is definitely wrong here. I start to wonder if I should pull over and let her out. After all, I don't know who she's communicating with or what's happening. But then I think maybe she really is in danger and needs help. I can't just abandon her. The tension builds as the miles pass. I keep glancing at the rearview mirror, hoping to see some sign of other cars or people. But the road remains deserted, as if we've been swallowed by emptiness. My fingers grip the wheel tightly, as a feeling of fear begins to overtake me. Finally, I spot a gas station ahead. Maybe I can get a better sense of what's going on there. As I approach, I see the woman jumping out of the truck and running towards a group of men waiting outside the store. My heart races as I notice they have a very suspicious look. I watch the scene closely, trying to understand what's happening. The woman talks to them in an urgent tone, pointing at something inside the truck. The men then look directly at me, their faces expressionless and threatening. A chill runs down my spine. Something is seriously wrong here. These men don't look friendly at all, and now they're approaching my vehicle. Instinctively, I roll up the windows and decide not to leave the truck. My hands clutch the steering wheel tightly as I watch the men circle my vehicle, clearly scrutinizing me. The woman seems to be giving them instructions, pointing in my direction. My eyes widen, my heart pounding. There's no doubt they're plotting something, and I feel deeply entangled in this terrible situation. I realize I need to get out of there as quickly as possible. But the road is deserted, there's no one around to ask for help. I'm alone, at the mercy of these dangerous individuals. Fear takes hold of me, and I feel like prey surrounded by predators. Without thinking twice, I start the truck and floor the gas pedal, leaving the gas station and its suspicious occupants behind. My heart is racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I can't stay there another second. I need to put as much distance as possible between me and those men. As I drive away, I grab my phone and dial the police, quickly explaining the situation. The officers ask me to stay put, but there's no way I'm staying there. I promise to keep them updated and give them my location before hanging up and focusing on the road again. As I drive, the reality of what just happened sinks in. That seemingly helpless woman was clearly involved in something illegal and tried to use me as bait for something sinister. I could have ended up being robbed or kidnapped if I hadn't acted quickly. A shiver runs through me just thinking about it. Only much later, when I finally reach my destination and feel safe, do I learn that the woman was part of a gang of thieves who targeted lonely truck drivers on deserted roads. She used her innocent appearance to lure victims, and her accomplices waited to carry out the robbery. I feel a huge sense of relief for having escaped in time, but also a deep frustration at being deceived in such a way. From that day on, I never took shortcuts through back roads again, even if it meant losing a bit more time. My safety is a priority. Some lessons are tough but definitely learned.